Hello everyone, my name is Bhattacharyya. I'm from the University of Glasgow and I'm here to present my paper, Sonomancer, Exploring Sonic Control Schemes for Audio Augmented Reality Games. For those of you who don't know, audio augmented reality is a sort of subcategory of augmented reality which is sound only. There are no visuals involved in an audio AR application. And this has applications in areas like navigation, locative audio, audio that's linked to a real-world location, and relevantly for us, they have applications as a medium for games. However, there are almost no audio AR games which have an awareness of a player's aural surroundings. They have no real understanding of what sounds are occurring around a player. This is despite them being entirely sonic in their output, and in contrast to visual AR, where games often try to understand what a user's play space is, what sort of objects are nearby, where the surfaces are, and get a three-dimensional understanding of the space so that they can more deeply integrate virtual elements into it. And of course, these aural surroundings can include sounds produced by the player, which would potentially allow for sonic control schemes. However, these have not been evaluated yet. So we conducted a systematic literature review of audio AR games and a user study comparing 3 different sonic control schemes with existing control schemes in 3 different AR game scenarios. And this is all in an effort to understand how sound-based audio AR gameplay controls compare to existing popular audio AR gameplay controls. We started off by conducting a systematic review of audio AR games to identify how they are currently controlled and the sort of game scenarios that they commonly feature, so that we could design test scenarios that would allow us to make valid comparisons with sonic control schemes. So we searched through academic and commercial sources. We found over 100 audio or audio AR games, 27 of which met our requirements, our criteria for an audio AR game, and which we analysed further. And we found that the most popular game scenarios were progressing through story, experiencing some kind of narrative, combat, fighting some sort of monster or entity, and searching for something hidden. We found that the most popular control schemes were physical movement, physically moving through the world, gesture, physical gesture, something like swinging a sword, and using a controller, a smartphone, some sort of control device to input commands to the game. And we found that only 2 games used a sonic control, and even then only one of them was actually a real game. One of them was just purely conceptual. And having conducted our systematic review, we then moved on to a user study. So we designed a mini-game for each of those 3 most popular gameplay scenarios, all of which were themed around a game where a player is playing as a sonic wizard, or what we called a Sonomancer. So we had a combat scenario where the player had to destroy a sonic monster, which sounded a little bit like this. We had a story scenario where the player had to awaken the ghost of an ancient Sonomancer and then learn a little bit about these sonic monsters.
To think that the monsters you now war against were once like us.
And then finally we had the search scenario where the player had to find and reactivate a sort of magical protection left behind by these ghosts, which sounded a little bit like this. And then we designed control schemes for 3 categories of sound which humans can produce, which is speech, musical sounds, and sounds which are neither speech nor music, and we're using the term from literature sonic gesture for these sounds. So in the speech control scheme, players had to speak a word or a small phrase. In the music control scheme, they were given a small glockenspiel. They had to play a single note or a sequence of notes. And in the sonic gesture control scheme, they had to snap their fingers or hum for a sustained length of time. And this gave us both short and long inputs to compare. And then in each minigame, users compared the 3 sonic controls that we had developed and one of the popular traditional controls that was identified in the systematic review. So that gave us 3 minigames where participants tested 4 control schemes for a total of 12 evaluations. In the combat scenario, the traditional scheme was a physical gesture, it was a sword swing. In the story scenario, it was using a physical controller, and in the search scenario, it was physically moving through the world. All the minigames ran on a Quest 3, which was operating in pass-through mode so that the player could still see everything around them, but they were still meant we were able to track them, we could play spatialized audio back to them, and we could run all the applications in one convenient little bundle. Every evaluation, every minigame lasted for at least 2 minutes and 5 trials. We use the term trials because all of the minigames were designed around localizing a virtual sound. There was a spatial audio played from a specific direction. The participant had to turn to face that direction and then do whatever it is they had to do in the game. And there were no visual components to any of these games. It was all purely auditory. We used a Wizard of Oz methodology because we can detect music, we can detect speech, we can detect the sonic gestures, but we can't do it as reliably as each other, and we certainly can't detect them as reliably as we can detect a button press or a physical gesture. So we instead use the Wizard of Oz methodology, where I had a hidden Quest controller and just pressed the button whenever the player gave the input, and that gave us a sort of an even best case scenario to compare all the different inputs. After each scenario, the participant was given a questionnaire with questions from the NASA TLX and the meaning, immersion, challenge, and ease of control subscales of the player experience imagery. And then we conducted a final interview after all 12 evaluations were completed. 11 of our 12 scenarios were conducted in the office space that you can see in the right-hand image there, and the physical movement scenario was conducted in an outdoor patio space that you can see in the left-hand image. In terms of results, we had 24 participants who completed the study, and we found that the majority of our quantitative measures showed no significant differences between any of our control schemes. And we did find that sonic gesture was rated as less meaningful and required more effort than speech did in the story scenario, and we found that the controller and sonic gesture were rated as easier to control than the musical input in the story scenario. The main differences we found were in the physical demand measure. We found that speech was less demanding than physical gesture. We found that speech and sonic gesture were less demanding than physical movement, and we found that the controller was less demanding than the musical control. In our final interview, participants were more positive about the sonic controls than they were about the traditional ones overall. Sonic gesture and physical gesture were also the most preferred control schemes. A few participants had concerns around sonic gesture, including potential fatigue from clicking too much, social acceptability, and feeling self-conscious about it when they were using that control scheme. Others, on the other hand, noted a feeling of power by snapping their fingers and making monsters disappear when using sonic gesture. The speech controls resulted in much higher self-consciousness as well, and concerns around embarrassment, and the music controls were quite polarizing, with 12 participants feeling positively and 11 feeling negatively. Concerns there included increased difficulty, lower immersion from having to look at this glockenspiel, general unwieldiness, and social acceptability again. And overall, there was no clear best control. Opinions on the established games were also quite varied, and participants often mentioned having an interest in a combination of controls. But in conclusion, we present here the first evaluation of sonic controls for audio AR games, and we find that with the minimal quantitative differences between established and sonic controls, that they are potentially viable for audio AR games going forward. Speech controls have some good promise, but with concerns around acceptability and potential silliness. And music controls were quite polarizing, and more work should be done to explore their potential. However, as our most promising sonic control, we would recommend that sonic gesture be considered in place of or in addition to physical gesture in the future. And while these results are rooted in an audio AR context, our findings possibly have implications for audio games more generally and in wider XR. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions about the paper, you can feel free to contact me on the email address shown on screen.